You need to be passionate about your job. And if you're passionate about your job, it's just going to make that work so much easier.
Right? I can't stress the importance of like the platoon leader, platoon sergeant relationship. The running joke is the platoon leader is mom and the platoon sergeant is dad.
There's things that you just aren't going to know. You need to just be honest about that. When you don't know, you don't know.
Come prepared. And if you don't know what you're doing, just say that. Bad news doesn't get better with time. So if you don't know what you're doing, go ask for that clarification and that guidance early on in the process. Don't wait until you're a week out and be like, surprise, I actually don't know what this thing is.
Right. So anything that you do or fail to do is going to be a reflection of both names on your chest.
Get prepared for the staff life.
The Army's not what you think it is, but it also will teach you a lot about yourself, and a lot of what you learn will always come back around.
Don't give up. There's always going to be stuff in the way. There's always going to be stuff to stop you. But you can't give up and you can't lose sight of the goal, because that's really what separates those who make it and those who don't.
It doesn't matter how strong you are. When spiritual weakness becomes a factor, you can be as strong as you want and you're not going to be effective.
I think one of the things that made me successful as a platoon leader was I didn't come in hot. And by that, I mean, I didn't come into the platoon and go, all right, I'm going to start changing everything, whether it be the platoon motto or, the symbol, that really wasn't my job, or really I wasn't in a position to do that. I had guys in that platoon that had been there for 2 or 3 years. So to come in kind of on that first week and to start changing things around really wasn't going to make me successful and kind of put me in a situation where I was going to be at odds with everyone. So really what I did, probably the first 2 to 3 weeks, kind of sit back and observe, right? Obviously, if there's something illegal, immoral, or unethical going on, right, then you step in, obviously. But really just kind of get a sense of who the guys and girls under your charge are going to be, right? I can't stress the importance of like the platoon leader, platoon sergeant relationship. The running joke is the platoon leader is mom and the platoon sergeant is dad. And that was pretty true for my platoon. The platoon sergeant, hard stripe D7, couple of deployments, knew what he was talking about, and was a no nonsense kind of guy. So it was really everything you could ask for in a platoon sergeant. So really developing that relationship with him, I think, is one of the biggest keys to success that I found.
There's a lot of cadets right now, and even brand new lieutenants in BOLIC, that have a lot of anxiety about meeting the platoon sergeant for the first time.
Yep. Yeah. So it is a unique situation I'm in. It was interesting coming in because typically the new lieutenant is one of the most inexperienced person, I guess, in the platoon comparable. Your platoon sergeants are most experienced. They're like the rock, the foundation, the continuity. Your platoon leader comes in, ROTC experience or OCS experience or whatever it may be, and they're put in that leadership spot. So coming in right away, you just gotta, not going back to know your audience, but like you gotta understand like what kind of group you're going into. So what I'd recommend is you show up and you get to observe. So if you come in just guns blazing, swinging, changing things, I'm going to change this, I want this to be different, it normally causes a big friction point between you and your platoon sergeant. So understanding how things are, obviously you can build upon things, but you need to take a step, kind of assess, see how everything's going, what kind of changes you think would just help the group. It doesn't always need to be because you think it'll just be better. Like, you just gotta be like, hey, I'm thinking about trying this. What do you think? Always be open to people's opinions and their perspective. They see it a certain way, you see it a certain way. So my platoon sergeant, when I first came in, it was interesting because I've been in the Army probably, I'd say like 6 years longer than him. So that's not your typical lieutenant and platoon sergeant relationship. But he was really, really professional. He was very knowledgeable. What he did have on me was all that reconnaissance experience. I never was in that before. I had my infantry experience. I had my intelligence experience. I didn't have that very specific scout or reconnaissance base. So he helped explain the very like specifics of that job, and then how the platoon worked, how it currently is working, and then based on that, we came up with a plan together to continuously improve and try to make the platoon the best we possibly could.
As an LT, you are using the previous product. You are digging through the shared drive, the team's folders. You're finding what the last guy did. You're taking that and you're trying to make it better.
Yes.
So you're going to copy and paste. You're going to plagiarize out of somebody else's work. And then you're going to say, hey, here's what they did. Let's find the AARs. Let's see how everybody felt about this. Somebody that was here for this training that participated. Let's get their feedback and then let's make it better. And that's when you then go and ask for help. You say, hey, I've already got this developed. I've already planned this out. This is scheduled. This is reserved. Now I need your help to really kind of take this to the next level and get it to the place where it needs to be great training, not just the same that we did last year. And that's where that help kind of comes in. Because as a junior officer, like, you'll know the basics coming in and you'll get more proficient as you go. But you can't beat the experience of someone who has, 10 plus years in service. You know what I mean? They've gone through the same training 3 times now. They know the ins and the outs of it. But you also don't want to go to them empty handed and be like, hey, I need to do this. And then you just kind of essentially dump it off on them to do all the heavy lifting. It definitely makes sure that you're taking the lion's share of the work and then coming to them for that, like, extra pizzazz, the finishing touches. To really kind of put it over the top.
How do you manage work and personal time?
Yeah, it's Chris, that's an art. I don't think anyone's 100% great at it. And if there was a solution, I think everyone would have a perfect balance, right? So it's definitely an art, and it's definitely something I need to work on personally. But you just got to. It boils down to this, right? I'm a single lieutenant. I got some hobbies on the outside that I like to get after, and I'm in Germany, right? Stationed in Germany with the 2nd Cavalry Regiment. So traveling is one of my hobbies, right? Experiencing other cultures. So I have this whole continent to travel when I'm off. So I take advantage of that. But I think the other part of the work-life balance people don't talk about a lot, right? Is you need to be passionate about your job, right? You're always going to have to work. If you want to put food on the table and make money, you're going to have to work somewhere, some way, somehow. And if you're passionate about your job, right, it's just going to make that work so much easier. So being passionate about whatever path you choose in the Army, or if you're in the civilian sector, being passionate about your degree and basing that off of where you want to, go on and do your career in, is good. But I'll tell you right now, passion number one. And I hope this applies to some of the cadets out there that are kind of figuring out, what they want to do. Don't get suckered or recruited into something that you're not passionate about branch wise. If you're not passionate about it, work's going to stink a little bit, right? You'll be surrounded by great people because it's the Army and we got some of the best people in the world in this organization. But if you're not passionate about it, things are going to slow down and be monotonous. So I'm passionate about field artillery. I'm passionate about leading soldiers. So maybe sometimes I work a little bit too much, but it doesn't feel like that, Chris. It almost feels like I'm doing what I love and I can't get enough of it, right? Maybe sometimes a little too much, right? And my soldiers are like, hey, sir, like, let's go home. Tasks are complete. I'm like, all right, roger that. Or my NCOs, remind me of that. But that passion and being passionate about the path you choose in the Army is going to make that work-life balance a lot easier because your work's not going to seem so much like work, right?
The Army's big on PT, right? We talk about developing ourselves physically, and lethality is directly connected to our ability to be physically fit and ready. And it wasn't until it's always been there, but FM 7-22 talks about holistic health and fitness, and spirituality is part of that. And so what I would challenge people to think about is think about the level of effort and thought you put into maintaining your physical body. And then compare that to what you do to maintain your spiritual core. Because I'm going to tell you right now, it doesn't matter how strong you are. When when spiritual weakness becomes a factor, you can be as strong as you want, and you're not going to be effective. So if I'm talking to leaders, if that's, who the primary audience of this podcast is, people who are, either who are listening to this because you came here from a different branch and you're just tuning in, what can you take away from this, man? Like that's it. Like we do this. I say this with PT because this is like the big obvious one. You got to go PT with their men if you want. You'd go do the thing with them so they can see that you do it. Like you got to do it yourself in order for other people to follow you. But I think for most of us, unfortunately, like we fail at the communicate the standard. Like we don't even really know what that looks like. And then we struggle to be there ourselves. And so we never even get to the rest of it. And so that's why I think, man, the best advice I can say is with that is really like, yeah, don't do it alone. Try to find someone to walk with. And that's why I love about the chaplain corps, like Chaplain Soldier and other people have others said this, the former chief of chaplains will say, we're here to bring soldiers to God and God to soldiers.
My first sergeant said, he said that you have two names on your chest and you have the ability to either make them look great or you have the ability to crush them and put them in the dirt. Right. And so it's like you have your name, obviously. So the things you do are going to affect your name. Right. But they're also going to affect the U.S. Army at the end of the day. Right. So anything that you do or fail to do is going to be a reflection of both names on your chest. Right. And so that's something that's super interesting. And yeah, I would just say when you're in a position, like give everything your 100%. There's going to be days where you're going to be like, man, I'm fed up with this. I don't want to do this or whatever. But something else that someone had told me at one time, because again, I'm going to give a lot of credit to my wife right now because she honestly works in the background in my life a lot, right? And she's the one that is just motivating me throughout all of it. So there will be days I come home and I'm like, man, I'm so tired of this. I want to get out of the Army. I'm done, right? And she will, kind of help me de-stress or like let it go. And that's going to happen in any job you do. That's something that I tell a lot of people is that everybody thinks the grass is greener on the other side once they get out of the Army or out of the military. But you're always going to have brown spots in your grass, right? No matter what, your grass isn't going to be the perfect spot of grass on the block, even if you switch houses, right? So I always tell people you're going to have ups and downs in any job you go to. You can get out of the Army and go to another job. You're still going to have things you're not going to enjoy or some things you're not going to like. But at the end of the day, in that moment, when you're upset about whatever you're working through or whatever's going on, by the time you get to the point where you can even make a decision on it and change whatever's going on, you're already going to be out of that storm, we'll call it, that you were in, right? So you're already going to be past it by the time that you can even make an effective change. So something that I would say for sure is like when you get put in positions, like give it your all and remember of like who you are doing it for. So like not only are you doing it for yourself, right? But because if you're going to do anything, you should do it 100%. There's no point in doing something if you're not going to give it your all when you go to do it, right? That's like if I was going to sweep my floor in my room right now, and instead of sweeping the second half of the room, what's the point in sweeping the first half? That makes no sense. It's just a waste of time. So it's the same thing when it comes to, if you get put in a job or you get told to do a certain tasking or you get put in a position you didn't expect, like give it your all. Because at the end of the day, again, you're doing it for yourself. So if you're going to do anything, might as well give it your best effort. 2, there's going to be someone that's going to come in behind you at some point and do your job once you're done with it. And you're either going to hurt them or you're going to help them. And what most of us should want to help the person that's coming in, because I know for a fact, like any job that I've had, whether it was the platoon, whether it was in staff, whether it was as the battalion maintenance officer, there have always been things where I'm like, man, I wish the person like ahead of me had done this, and this. It would have helped me out, right? And I'm now, like when we get back to the U.S., I'm going to be switching out. So like recently I've been thinking, how can I do things to queue up the next guy or the next girl who takes my position, right? And so, yeah, I would just say like the number one thing is like giving your best effort in everything. And there's going to be days where you're not going to get your 100%. You're going to be lacking, right? And that's going to happen. But you shouldn't sit there and be like, man, this is stupid. I'm not going to do this at all. Or I hate this thing. I don't want to put effort into it. Like if you get assigned something, like put your best effort in, right? Again, because you got 2 names on your chest.
So even though I didn't come here prepared, I came here with an open mind, and the people that you'll work with in this type of role, from every member of your platoon, every single soldier you have, to all the staff sections you'll work with, to all the senior officers, senior NCOs that you'll work with. They'll all have something to teach you. And if you just come with the right mindset, it almost doesn't matter what you've learned beforehand. You'll get to where you need to be.
Advice I'll give my younger self and anyone pursuing this is don't give up. In general, don't give up. There's always going to be stuff in the way. There's always going to be stuff to stop you, but you can't give up and you can't lose sight of the goal, because that's really what separates those who make it in the program and those who don't, is that willingness to put forth the effort and jump all of those obstacles.
Ranger School, can you talk about that briefly?
Yeah, sure. It is not impossible. Take it from a guy who is, am I good physically? Absolutely. Am I what you would call like the stud? Absolutely not. Don't get me wrong. Is it uncomfortable at times? Absolutely. Are you cold, wet, and tired? Sure. But it is possible. And it is more than doable. I hesitate to say that it was fun. Would I want to go back? Probably not. You'd have to give me some time to kind of gear up for it again. But it is doable. It's a heck of an experience. It surrounds you with guys and girls that are like-minded and just really want to get after it. It's a pretty motivating environment. And you're put in situations that kind of force you to really push kind of what you thought your boundaries were, and really explore ultimately what those limits are. And you find out pretty quickly that you can push much farther than you give yourself credit for. So it's pretty cool.
So have you had any experience in your 14 plus years of service with mentors? And if so, what advice would you give to brand new second lieutenants about finding mentors in their units? And just overall, how has it impacted your career?
Yeah, so I would say I have had a few different mentors. I guess the first one I would say was going back to like when I was enlisted. I had a squad leader. They ended up getting out of the Army probably 3 years after I met him. But I maintained that relationship, and his knowledge and his passion and what he explained to me and taught me, like I've kept that my whole life in the military. So that's like a natural type of mentor that you would think you would have. There's other ones that you probably are going to have that aren't your typical ones. So like a lot of people don't think that some mentors are going to be outside like their jobs. So like I've had company commanders in the past that are not military intelligence officers. They were infantry or they're armor or something like that they made a big impact on me on just how well they led, and then how well they could like describe the situation to you and just provide you that guidance. So I remember when I was tossing up if I wanted to become a commissioned officer or not, I didn't know. I talked to a lot of the previous officers I worked with. I was like, what do you think? Do you think this would be like a good fit for me? Do you think I would like do well? I'm concerned because I've been an NCO for almost 10 years at that time. Like, would it just be really weird for me? And everyone explained that I had the right personality for it and the right fit. So I think mentors are a big part of it. You just got to find the right ones. It's not always the most obvious ones for every single person. I currently say I'd have one that is like my brigade level military intelligence officer. He's a very smart individual, and he is always trying to do his best to what's right for his intelligence officers. So he's always reaching out. Hey, is everything going well? What do you guys want to do next? Like here, I'll show you my explanation on how I did my career path. This is kind of steps that I took. And then normally, based on his experience, like he knows the right steps, who to talk to, what courses to go to, and just where you want to go. He helps try to manage those steps to get you to that right path. So I guess the end story is like mentorship is a big thing. It's just you guys got to find the right one. So it just everyone's gonna be a little bit different, and even if it's not your MOS or your job, they can also provide some valuable insight. I took, and I'm still learning, developing as I go, but it took me a long time to develop my style. What I thought works best for me doesn't always work best for the next person. So I guess the biggest thing is like knowing how to talk to people, learn and like get to know your soldiers, get to know your leaders, like understand what makes them tick and like what is going to work and how they're going to process the information the best. So if you don't know how to talk to people, life's going to be a lot harder than it should be. So being able to talk and then provide them the right direction and motivation goes a long way in your day-to-day life.
So,
But at the end of the day, when you get to your unit, you're going to learn all their SOPs. You're going to learn all of the ways they want things done. Because in BOLIC, for example, when you go to do your op words, it's going to be absolutely insane. They're going to have a whole list of things that they want you to brief, and it's going to be like a checklist, almost like you're getting graded back in high school or college. And it will be, did you hit this? Did you hit this? Did you brief this thing? And they give you a time allotments, right? They'll tell you, oh, you have 50 minutes or 2 hours or 1 hour to brief whatever scale of a operation you're briefing, right? But then you're going to get to your unit, and then you're going to get to your platoon, and things are going to be totally different. Because, for example, ROTC, BOLIC, you have a bunch of people who are future officers or already currently lieutenants, right? And they're all going to be in the same mindset. They're going to understand things you're going to talk about. They're going to be able to sit there and listen to an hour brief and retain, hopefully, at least 50% of it, right? But when I got to my platoon, for example, I had guys who, one of my drivers, one of my loaders, they're sitting there. I go to do an op-word brief. If the op-word brief was more than 20 minutes, like we'd start having people, zoning out, and that's typical. Like when you're in the field, it's going to be difficult. So that was like a wake up call to me. I was like, oh man, like this is totally different than ROTC, totally different than BOLIC. Like I got to do things that make sense. So common sense became a huge thing where I feel like sometimes in like the TRADOC world or in, cadet land, I'll call it, you kind of have this veil over your eyes is what I'll call it, where you think that everything is going to be like, oh, this is how it's going to be always. This is how it's going to be perfect. Like I have my perfect model in front of me, right? But then you're going to get to your unit and the veil is almost like lifted off your face at that point. You're like, oh, wow, like I have to adapt to whatever I've got going on, right? So you might have situations that are going to be you have a lot shorter time cut, or, you might have a different variety of people that you have to, put it in a way that they'll understand it, not something that, everybody in BOLIC would have understood. So it is a wake up call for sure. You learn.
Last question.
You're good.
What advice would you give Cadet Blasek?
The Army's not what you think it is, but it also will teach you a lot about yourself, and a lot of what you learn in your time in the Army will always come back around. So every single thing you do matters, because at some point in time you will rely on that knowledge, whether you realize it or not. So, yeah. That was very on the spot. I was like trying to think.